Hey guys, tonight we're brushing off an ancient mystery literally. You're standing in the silence just before dawn, outside a temple that's older than your concept of old. The sandstone still holds a trace of yesterday's heat, but the air bites cool against your skin. Somewhere behind those columns, gods are sleeping. Not metaphorically. In ancient Egypt, gods resided in statues, real ones. And if you've been assigned to a temple priest's feather crew, like you have tonight, it means one thing. You're about to wake them up. A thin-robed priest hands you a feather. Not just any feather, it's long, silvery, and stiff, taken from the wing of a sacred goose, probably one that ate better than most people. Gentle, he whispers, like you've never touched a statue before. The other priests begin moving with eerie precision, their bare feet silent against the polished floor. You follow, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pass between rows of lotus-shaped columns. The scent of crushed myrrh rises from somewhere unseen, warm and sharp like a spicy hug. The light comes not from the sun yet, but from tiny flickering oil lamps. Shadows dance across the stone walls, which are covered in hieroglyphs that look like they've been whispering to each other for 3,000 years. Your assignment: dusting the divine. But not just randomly. Oh no. This is a highly specific practice called the opening of the mouth, a daily act of revival. Egyptian priests believed that statues, if properly cleaned, oiled, and feathered, could literally awaken, not symbolically. Literally, they could see, hear, breathe, even eat, as long as the right codes were used, and you've just entered that code. The goose feather. Each statue has its own chamber, its own temperament. Some are huge, towering black granite beasts with falcon heads and chiseled musculature. Others are smaller, ivory-bodied goddesses with serene smiles and eyes that somehow follow you even when you look away. You trudge into the sanctuary of Horus. The air changes. The temperature drops slightly, or maybe you just feel it drop because now you're sharing space with a living god. The priests begin to hum softly, not quite singing, but enough to keep the vibration steady. The hum guides the feather. With a steady hand, you raise your arm and begin your first stroke from the statue's left shoulder to its heart. Not right to left. That would signify closing the spirit. And nobody wants a grumpy god before breakfast. The feather leaves no visible mark. But you notice something anyway. A shiver in the atmosphere, like static. It could be your imagination. Or it could be the statue noticing you. Egyptian priests didn't just clean statues. They revived them. The feathering wasn't to remove dust. It was to restore the soul force. In the Book of Coming Forth by Day, which is what we call the Book of the Dead, there's an obscure passage about a whispering feather that keeps the gods alert. Some scholars think that refers to this exact act, brushing the statues in feather codes to trigger divine awareness. Historians still argue whether the priesthood actually believed the statues woke up, or if it was just part of a highly theatrical spiritual routine. But then again, these are the same people who built pyramids aligned so precisely with the stars that even modern architects still squint. You keep dusting. Each stroke has a rhythm, like a slow, ancient song. Shoulder to chest, chin to crown, elbow to elbow, and finally, if you're very trusted, one stroke down the center of the lips. Only high priests are allowed to touch the statue's mouth. It's considered the portal. The originals speak to the manager zone of the divine. Beside you, one priest falters. He hesitates over the mouth, flicking the feather an inch too high. Another priest gently corrects him with a glance that says, "Don't make us all explode." It's a tense moment. But the statue does not smite anyone. It simply waits. You retreat silently. The feather goes into a reed box lined with perfumed cloth. It must rest too, apparently. Outside, the sun has risen. The white light slices through the temple like a god's laser pointer, illuminating floating motes of dust, the same ones you were just gently brushing off the cheeks of immortals. You're exhausted, slightly dizzy from the incense, and wondering how much of what you felt was performance and how much was power. One priest pats your shoulder. He hands you a small square of cloth, still warm from his hand, and whispers, "Tomorrow, we learn what to do if the god speaks back." You blinked. They do that. Your second morning in the temple starts earlier than the first. You are already beginning to understand something most tourists never grasp. Being a priest wasn't all linen robes and cosmic secrets. It was mostly hunger, heat, and hyper-specific chores, especially around feathers. Before the sun even threatens the horizon, you're escorted to the House of Oils, a dim chamber where glassy vials line the walls like perfume soldiers. There's a faintly medicinal smell like crushed leaves, honey, and something vaguely metallic. Or maybe that's just your empty stomach reacting to the dried figs you weren't allowed to eat. Feather prep begins with scent. The overseer priest murmurs, holding up a translucent bottle filled with golden fluid. Ostrich oil for Osiris, goose oil for Hathor. And this, he says, holding up a jar of paste with flecks of gold, is not for you. He doesn't explain further. Turns out, not all feathers are created equal. You'd assumed dusting with feathers was just an ancient version of light cleaning. Wrong! It's a sensory equation. Feather type plus scent plus dust equals message to God. Every combination delivers a different emotional tone. Today's lesson, forbidden snacks and sacred oils. You're guided to the feather bench, where feathers are sorted like scrolls. Some are thin and needle-like, clearly plucked from wing edges. Others are round and puffy, like tiny clouds dyed in temple-approved browns and creams. They're grouped by bird: sacred ibis, goose, heron, even rare hoopoe feathers prized for their spiraled pattern that supposedly confuses demons. You reach for one. No garlic last night, the priest asks. You freeze. That's not random. Priests had strict dietary rules. No garlic, no onions, no beans, no fish, no drunken dreams. One bite of the wrong thing, and the oils on your fingers would ruin the feather's purity or worse, insult the god it was meant for. Apparently, garlic was considered spiritually aggressive. It seeped into your sweat, your breath, and by extension, your prayers. In one ancient letter, a priest accuses his colleague of smelling like punishment, which is either poetic or just very literal. You exhale nothing garlicky and are allowed to continue. The feather you're handed is lined with a thin edge of red dye. It's goose, but enhanced. This one is for Amarna-style temple rituals. The elder says, light pressure, no dragging, like you're trying to tickle a cloud without waking it. You try it on the air first, then on your forearm. It's almost ridiculous how serious everyone is about this. But in their worldview, the gods weren't abstract. They were present, inhabiting statues, breathing incense, absorbing your every motion, even your scent. Hence the oils. You're told to apply a single drop of heron oil to the base of the feather. This changes the ritual completely. Now the feather becomes a vehicle of grace, meant to soothe deities who may have had a rough night. You think that's a joke? Until you're told gods can get annoyed by regional prayers. While preparing your set, a junior priest bumps into a feather tray. Instant panic. Feathers scatter. One touches the floor. Everyone gasps. It's like someone just dropped a newborn in slow motion. The supervising priest retrieves it, studies it grimly, and places it into a bowl of water laced with crushed lotus. Purification. He mutters, feathers that touch the ground can't be reused without being spiritually cleansed. And cleansing is its own separate ritual, which you're told you'll learn if you last the week. Historians still argue whether these rituals were meant for the gods or just to maintain psychological order among temple workers. One theory even suggests that feather codes helped synchronize memory patterns in the priesthood. Like a tactile, scented language, you can kind of see it. Each step is hypnotic. Feather, oil, incense, motion. And don't forget the forbidden snacks list, which gets longer the more you ask questions. Someone mentions lentils. Another says dates are only allowed on festival days. You're pretty sure someone else mumbles no dreams of fire, but nobody elaborates. Your job today is feather delivery. You carry the final prepared bundles to the inner sanctum, where a goddess statue waits in darkness. The chamber is perfumed with crushed cinnamon bark and desert rose. You hear nothing but the soft shh of feathers moving across bronze skin. You glance at the priest beside you. His hands move with gentle swirls, not straight lines this time, spiral strokes over the statue's arms. A sign of continuous favor. You mentally file that one away. Then he does something unexpected. He brushes the feather along the statue's earlobe. You raise a brow, listening, offering. He says, without looking up, "We ask her to overhear something on our behalf." Okay, that's new. Apparently, this specific motion goose feather, sandalwood oil, 3 loops over the ear tells the goddess to lean in, spiritually, like cupping your hand around a friend's ear in a crowded room. You wonder if anyone's ever feathered a statue to unhear something, a kind of divine nevermind. You decide not to ask. The day ends not with fanfare, but with a silent bow. The feathers are removed, sealed back into their reed cases, and stored in a dry chamber that smells like old papyrus and lavender. You're allowed one final act, a personal feather pass. You dip a hoopoe feather spiraled, soft into a faint trace of cedar oil, and gently sweep it across the base of the statue's feet. An offering of presence. No words needed. It's like brushing your thumb across the rim of an ancient cup and somehow feeling a heartbeat. You're not just dusting anymore. Today, you're waking something up. The temple feels different this morning. Heavier. Not in a dark, ominous way, more like walking into a room where someone's been holding their breath for centuries and just exhaled. You move through the now familiar corridors with your bundle of feathers tucked under your arm like sacred laundry. The floor still creaks ever so slightly when you step near the cracked lotus tile. The incense haze tastes faintly of date resin. And what is that? Juniper. It's your 3rd day. And today, you've graduated. No more feather prep. No more watching from the sidelines. You're part of the reanimation team now, which sounds dramatic until you realize that, in the eyes of these priests, you really are performing a sort of divine CPR, and it starts with the eyes. The statue before you is large, twice your height, and made of jet black diorite. It's the god Ptah, the creator of the universe, who, according to temple lore, spoke the world into existence with his heart and tongue. A god of craftsmen, a god of shaping, and also, apparently, a god with sensitive eyelids. That's where you begin. A soft ostrich feather, dipped in chamomile oil, makes its gentle debut across the statue's lashes. 1 stroke per eye, 1 for seeing, 1 for witnessing. You're told this isn't just symbolic. The Egyptians believed statues needed their senses reawakened daily to remain open conduits for the gods. Eyes were for perception, ears for judgment, nostrils for divinity, and the mouth, well, we'll get to that. There's a scroll open near your station, half unrolled and held down by a carved alabaster weight shaped like a beetle. It details the exact order of awakening strokes. Eyes first, then temples, then jawline, then lips if you dare, and finally, the chest where the god spirit was believed to rest at night. Your feather hand trembles slightly, not from fear, more like reverence, or maybe too much date wine at yesterday's brief but festive lunch. The priest supervising you speaks only once during the entire ritual. Don't rush the breath. You don't understand at first. But then you notice the moment you begin feathering around the nostrils, a breeze picks up in the chamber. There's no open door, no window, just the faintest inhale. The statue does not move, but something in the air responds as if it's been seen or seen you. You pause. You've read modern historians who scoff at the idea of animated statues. The standard scholarly line is that these were complex rituals designed to elevate the prestige of the priesthood and reinforce a cosmic order. But then again, those historians didn't just watch a carved stone nose breathe in like it was testing your scent. Some fringe Egyptologists point to electromagnetic interference changes in humidity, causing stone to sweat or shift slightly. Others theorize about sound resonance from the chant frequencies. A few even claim the ancients encoded subtle movement into the structure of certain statues using heated air and balancing tricks. Historians still argue whether anyone actually believed the gods entered the statues, or whether belief was irrelevant because the statues acted like gods regardless. Either way, you're now brushing Ptah's lips. The feather passes over smooth stone, and you hear it, a faint click. You freeze. The priests don't flinch. They keep humming. You wonder, did the statue just move? Or was it thermal stress? Or maybe it was just your joints popping from standing still too long. But something in your chest tightens with awe. Next comes the breath ritual. The feather is dipped not in oil, but in a mist made from crushed lotus, dew, and something called blue myrrh, which no one will explain. You're told to blow very gently across the feather's surface while passing it under the statue's nose. This is meant to carry voice to the unseen. And here's the weird part. You almost hear it speak back. Not in words, not even in thought. Just a sense, like when someone enters the room behind you and you suddenly remember a dream you weren't supposed to forget. One priest closes his eyes and whispers, "He's awake now." Another makes a marking on a reed sheet to record the time, weather, and tone of awakening. Apparently, gods can have moods when they wake. Today, Ptah seems neutral, which, honestly, feels like a win. Your final task is to offer the god his symbolic breakfast, a feather-dabbed tray of honeyed dates. Beer foam, not the liquid, just the foam, and a soft linen cloth scented with cinnamon smoke. The food isn't consumed, of course, but it's expected, like placing coffee on an ancestor's shrine, or slipping a snack to your favorite painting because you're pretty sure it winks at you sometimes. Once everything is placed, the statue is bowed to not once, but twice. First by the priests, then by you. You walk backward out of the chamber, which is trickier than it sounds when you're clutching a half-damp feather and trying not to trip over sacred thresholds. Back in the hallway, you exhale. That breath your own is a little shakier than you expected. You just reanimated a god, or pretended to. Or maybe those two things are closer than they seem. The sun hasn't even cleared the limestone hills, but something about the temple feels alert. Not just the usual morning murmurs or sandal shuffles. No, this is different. You sense it in the hallway where the black statue of Anubis casts a longer shadow than it should. You feel it in the way the incense smoke curls left instead of right, like it's dodging something you can't see. And you absolutely feel it when you walk into the chamber of Hathor and see three priests staring at her statue like it just blinked. No one speaks. You hear one of them whisper, "Her eyes were looking at the door." You stand at the threshold, unsure if you're supposed to go in or if going in means you're part of whatever that was. Statue blinking is one of those topics that makes historians either squirm or sigh dramatically into their coffee. There are records, dozens actually, of temple workers, royal scribes, and even casual passers-by swearing that statues moved, not fully, not dramatically, but slightly, just enough to register as impossible. Modern scholars attribute it to lighting tricks, psychological suggestion, and what they generously call ritual hypnosis, which is a polite way of saying you were too sleepy and impressionable to know better. But the ancient texts don't flinch. They expect this. In the scroll of daily offerings, there's a line that loosely translates as, "If the goddess turns her cheek to you, lower your eyes and repeat the breath offering," which strongly suggests someone, at some point, watched a statue turn her cheek. And today, apparently, that's what just happened. You enter anyway, slowly, cautiously. The room smells like cardamom and burnt cedar. Not unpleasant, but stronger than usual. Maybe the incense was overused. Maybe not. Hathor's statue stands about your height, slender, serene, and made of polished sycamore wood, inlaid with lapis lazuli eyes. She's wearing her usual headdress, cow horns cradling the solar disk. Her expression is unreadable, a little too serene. The kind of face that makes you feel like you're the one being watched. Your task today? Size is limited. A minor reawakening ritual. Just a refresh of yesterday's offering. 2 feather strokes across the eyes, 1 along the jawline, and a spiral over the heart. You step forward, raise your feather, but then flicker. The corner of your eye catches a shift, just a tiny one. Her eyes look left. When they were facing forward, you freeze. The feather trembles in your grip. Behind you, someone inhales sharply. No one says anything. You step back. Silence. The statue does not move again. Of course not. You decide to complete the strokes anyway. Slowly. 1 across the left eye. 1 across the right. A hesitation, then the jawline, then the spiral on the chest. The chamber feels warmer. too warm. You notice a bead of sweat rolling down your neck. The priest next to you clears his throat softly, then mutters, "It only happens when the offering was too strong." You don't know what that means. Apparently, if the correct feather combination is used, say, one from a newly molted ibis wing, dipped in jasmine resin and sprinkled with desert pollen, it can create an overcharge, like giving the statue a double espresso. Sometimes they twitch, or blink, or sigh. There's even a fringe theory in the temple that suggests the statues store excess energy, that the gods themselves don't reside there full-time, but instead visit like house guests. You're not sure if that's better or worse. Historians still argue whether these sightings were hallucinations, optical illusions, or sincere experiences of divine presence. One even suggested it was the result of ancient hallucinogenic incense, but no one's ever been able to confirm the ingredients of the original Black Lotus smoke. What you do know is that the statue doesn't move again, but you do. You finish the ritual, carefully place the feather back in its wrap, bow once, and begin to exit. And then something strange happens. You feel the statue smile. Not see, not hear, but feel. It's like a warmth behind your ribs, like a small thank you that arrives with no sound, no movement, just a sensation that wasn't there a moment ago. By the time you step outside, the sun has crept up over the temple walls. Light filters in like golden dust, and you breathe in the smell of fig trees and distant bread ovens. You tell yourself the blink was just a shadow. You tell yourself the warmth was just incense. You tell yourself the statue definitely didn't smile. But you also glance back, one last time, and Hathor's eyes, still watching. Today, you don't get one feather. You get 8. They're laid out on a palm fiber mat in front of you, each one tagged with a tiny linen scrap tied around the shaft. The inscriptions are painted in black ink. Nothing fancy, just rushed temple shorthand. But the message is clear. Each feather means something different. Not in the symbolic sense, in the actual emotional sense. You're told that gods, like people, wake up moody, and it's your job to figure out what mood they're in. The priest with the scroll explains it like he's discussing breakfast toppings. This one's for joy. This is for grief. This is attraction. Careful with that one. This, irritation. This is repentance. This is restlessness. And this he pauses over a jet black feather with a twisted spine. This is best not used unless you're very sure. You're not very sure, but curiosity has you cataloging them with intense focus. The yellow-edged heron feather smells faintly of lemongrass. The long, bluish one goose, maybe vulture, has been lacquered at the tip with something sticky and sweet. That's the feather of yearning, the priest says, rolling his eyes as if he's seen too many statues get smitten. Apparently, this isn't just spiritual intuition. There's a real code to it. Feathers were emotional instruments in the temple, a kind of divine therapy tool. Want to soothe a grieving god? Use the lapwing feather dipped in violet oil. Want to ask forgiveness? Go with the hawk tail, brushed over the statue's knees. Need the god's full attention after a temple scandal. Use the twisted ibis plume and pray it doesn't backfire. Historians still debate whether these feather moods were formalized in priestly training or passed down more informally. Some texts hint at apprenticeships lasting a full decade before a novice was allowed to touch the personal bundle of god feathers. Other scrolls treat them like intuitive props. If the god weeps, wipe with wind. If the god laughs, still the air, which could mean anything. But today, you're shadowing a priest who specializes in emotional alignment. His name is Henneti, and he has a perpetual frown that suggests the gods are never quite happy with his feather work. Your assigned god this morning is Thoth, god of wisdom, keeper of writing, inventor of time, and, if the mutterings around the oil basin are true, kind of a drama queen when neglected. You step into his shrine and immediately feel the mental shift. The room is square, lined with turquoise tiles, and smells sharply of mint and something darker, old ink. Maybe the statue is tall, ibis-headed, wearing a moon-disc headdress and a long kilt carved into the base. Henneti sniffs the air. Restless. You're not sure how he knows. He doesn't explain, just picks the feather marked with 3 black dots, the feather of agitation, and hands it to you. It's not punishment, he says, sensing your hesitation. It's acknowledgement. He's annoyed. we acknowledge. You dip the feather in bay leaf oil and flick it 3 times around the statue's wrists. The movement is precise, like fanning a fire just enough to keep it alive. Next comes a horizontal pass across the beak in apology, apparently, for asking too many things yesterday. You watch as Henneti gently taps the chest of the statue with the back of the feather, not brushing, just tapping, like knocking on a door and whispering, "Still with us." A breeze stirs in the room. Maybe, or maybe not. You are told to try the blue-tipped feather next to the one for invitation. It's usually reserved for asking questions. And since Thoth is a god of scribes, he responds well to requests that come in feather form rather than word form. You do the loop pattern around the statue's left foot. This one's called the Circle of Return. It's a sign of wishing the god to revisit a decision, possibly even change his mind. Henneti hums. Not bad. You feel absurdly proud. Then, without warning, the room changes. The air grows still. Charged, your skin prickles. You swear the eyes of the statue shimmer, not glow. Just shimmer, like heat-off stone. Henneti drops into a bow. You follow. Hard floor. Knees first, then the breeze again, except this time, it's warm. The feather in your hand lifts slightly on its own. Not like a gust caught it, more like it wanted to float. And for a brief moment, you think you hear something that might be a chuckle. Faint. High-pitched. Maybe the statue, maybe Henneti, or maybe you're more tired than you thought. Historians still argue whether these two emotional feathers were actually believed to communicate with the gods, or were simply psychological tools for the priests themselves. A few more fringe scholars point out that similar feather codes existed in rituals in Nubia and even parts of early Mesopotamia, suggesting a much older system of emotional symbology tied to bird plumage. You finish the ritual by placing the feathers in a wooden bowl, offering a single drop of pomegranate syrup, symbolic sweetness, and backing away in silence. Henneti finally speaks. He forgives. You're not sure what for, but you nod anyway. The final act is personal. You're allowed to select one feather and keep it in your sash for the rest of the day. You choose the yellow-edged one, joy, because after a morning like this, anything darker might be too real. You're in the crypts now. Well, not the crypts, exactly, but the subterranean shrine chambers where the dead pharaohs still receive their morning feather routines. It's colder down here, and the air is thick like soup made of incense, limestone, and stories people stop telling out loud. Today's assignment isn't for a god. It's for a dead man who thinks he is one. The feathering of funerary statues is quieter, slower. You're told not to chant, not to hum, not to breathe too hard. These statues aren't meant to wake up in the way the gods do. They're meant to stay awake, locked in an eternal twilight state where offerings can still be accepted and dignity maintained. You shuffle into a small chamber lit by 2 oil dishes floating on resinous bark. The light flickers against a life-size statue of Pharaoh Setemka, granite face, stiff, ceremonial beard, and carved coal rings around his eyes. His hands hold crooks, crossed like a waiting question. His mouth is ever so slightly open, still hungry. The feather priest beside you mutters. You think he's joking. He's not, apparently. Statues in tomb sanctuaries are given daily emotional recalibration through feathers, so they don't grow restless. Or, worse, forget. Feather choice here is even more precise than with the living gods, because now the statue is the pharaoh. This isn't an idol meant to house a divine visitor. It's a body double, a backup hard drive of royal presence. And if you brush it wrong, you risk confusing the spirit that's supposed to be enjoying its eternal rest. You're handed 2 feathers today, one white ibis plume, one split vulture feather dyed in desert ochre. The white is for calm. The ochre is for memory. Your job: use the calm feather on the forehead and jawline to ease Setemka into a state of restful clarity. Then, with the ochre feather, reawaken key memories stored in symbolic body zones. Left wrist battle glory, solar plexus fatherhood, and the right ankle love of date wine and river reeds. You think that last one sounds oddly specific? It is. You're told each pharaoh statue comes with its own emotional anatomy map, passed down through mortuary scrolls and priestly training. One wrong feather in one wrong spot and you might trigger the memory of a betrayal, or a lost war, or a lover buried in secret. You don't want to mess this up, so you start slow. Forehead, jawline, eyes closed. The chamber feels heavier by the second, like someone is listening from inside the walls. The kind of quiet that makes you forget how to blink. You gently stroke the ochre feather across the ankle and whisper nothing at all. You're not supposed to speak. The idea of feathers as memory triggers may sound poetic, but some fringe scholars have taken it seriously. They argue that the combination of scent, pressure, and repeated daily ritual could have created a kind of associative encoding not for the dead, but for the living, like training a muscle to remember an emotion by touch. Historians still argue whether this was early psychology, spiritual theater, or something closer to hypnosis. But you feel something, deep in your gut. Maybe it's the air pressure, or maybe it's the sense that this stone man once ruled a nation and now relies on your clumsy hands to remember he had a favorite wine. The priest beside you finishes his part. A soft, sweeping gesture across the statue's chest that seems more like an embrace than a blessing. He leaves a single lotus petal on the base of the statue and backs away. You're told to end the ritual with a final feather pass, a spiral just above the statue's heart. It's meant to remind the pharaoh's spirit that it still resides within. You do it. The feather hesitates midair. You think for a second it might float, but no. It's just your hand trembling again. The ritual ends. No dramatic signs, no spooky statue movements, just a stillness that feels satisfied. You're told later that some temples had color-coding systems for the dust used on funerary statues. Red for war memory, blue for dreams, gold for legacy, and green rare and almost impossible to find for forgiveness. You wonder how often that one was used. As you leave the chamber, the scent of the crypts clings to your linen, earthy, faintly metallic, like stone that has learned how to weep in silence. You walk back into daylight blinking, adjusting and feel a little different. Not haunted, not blessed, just aware. Aware that somewhere, deep below the city of the living, statues are being gently reminded every day that they once mattered. That they still do. The dust you're using is not just dust. That becomes abundantly clear the moment a priest slaps a pouch into your palm and says, "Don't breathe too deep." You immediately want to breathe deep, naturally, but you don't. You glance inside the pouch instead and see a fine powder pale gray with shimmering flecks. It smells like an old attic that used to house perfume, mysterious, sweet, faintly acidic. Today, you learn what goes into the dust. Turns out, it's more than just ground-up stone and wishful thinking. Way more. You're taken to a preparation chamber beneath the feather hall, cool, dark, and ventilated by narrow slits carved into the stone high above your head. Inside, clay bowls, reed sieves, dried petals, and rows of sealed jars. It looks like a quiet apothecary shop, if apothecaries only catered to eternal beings who hate chaos and adore symbolism. The feather dusting ritual isn't just about motion, it's about substance. The priest overseeing this part of your training is meticulous. He wears gloves made from gazelle hide and handles every ingredient like it's explosive. A good dust carries memory. He says, a great dust carries identity. You stare down at the labeled jars. Crushed rose hips from Nubia. Powdered lapis lazuli, black pollen from sacred lotus, ash of sycamore bark, desert salt filtered through linen, and something called breath ash, which no one wants to explain. The process is slow. First, you grind the minerals by hand, yes, with a literal mortar and pestle until they're fine enough to pass through the reed sieve. The colors shift as you go. Dark red becomes dusty gold. Lapis turns smoky blue. These aren't just for show. Each hue signals an emotion or invocation. Red dust stimulates divine attention. Blue dust soothes. Yellow dust asks for protection. White dust, memory. The kind that sticks. You mix them with dried flower matter, mostly invisible to the eye but strong in scent. The olfactory signal is as important as the visual one. The priest says, the gods don't read glyphs like we do. They read smell. That's when it really hits you. Every sweep of the feather is a sentence. The feather, osus, verb. The dust, an adjective. The direction of your stroke, That's the tone. And just like that, your entire understanding of dusting statues goes from quiet reverence to high-stakes emotional grammar. You begin your task for the day, preparing a blend for a statue of Isis in the upper sanctuary. The intention is healing, so your recipe includes crushed mint for breath, blue myrrh powder for memory restoration, a pinch of ground peridot to soften grief, and pollen collected from a sunlit garden on the temple roof, rare and fragrant, a coded signal for rebirth. You're warned not to sneeze near it. And they're not joking. Some of these dusts are so finely calibrated that a single sneeze, one misaligned gust of air, could scramble the offering. You imagine a statue waking up thinking it's a crocodile priest instead of a healing goddess. No thanks. Historians still argue whether these powder recipes were mystical or medicinal. Some speculate that the ingredients had mild psychoactive effects either on the statue, metaphorically speaking, or on the priest applying them. A few fringe researchers have noted that many of the recipes align with ancient herbal memory treatments. So was it magic or primitive aromatherapy? Hard to say, but you feel different holding the final mix in your hands. Not powerful, more like humbled. This isn't glitter, it's coded memory, a chemical language, and you're about to write a poem on the body of a goddess. Back in the sanctuary, the air shifts as you enter. The statue of Isis is luminous even in shadow. She wears a headdress shaped like a throne. Her arms are extended slightly welcoming or warning. It's hard to say. Your job is to dust her left shoulder, right forearm, and breastplate in slow, even strokes. You start with the shoulder. The feather releases a puff of dust as it moves, and for a moment, the whole room smells like a warm garden after a storm. Floral, wet, alive. The next stroke hits the forearm. You use a gentle flick. Diagonally across the arm muscle, the dust hangs in the air like it's reluctant to fall. You resist the urge to sneeze. Last comes the breastplate. One long curve of the feather, arching like a comet across her heart. The dust glimmers, then fades into the bronze. The statue doesn't move, but somehow the room feels less heavy, like someone just exhaled for the first time in centuries. You leave a single dab of dust at the base of her feet, a punctuation mark to your feathered sentence, and back away in silence. You're told the goddess will process the offering in her own time. You're also told to wash your hands very carefully, especially if you want to avoid accidental dreams, because some of these powders, apparently, linger in the skin and sneak into the mind while you sleep. One priest claims he dreamed of a three-headed ibis giving him advice on tax reform. You're not sure whether to believe him, but you scrub your palms anyway, just in case. You've now witnessed something that few initiates get to see, a full-on feather argument. And yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. It starts just after dawn, in the central atrium where the feather bundles are typically sorted with monk-like calm. Today, not so much. Two senior priests are locked in a heated, whisper-yelling debate, both gripping feathers like courtroom evidence. You use the repentance feather on a fertility statue. Hisses the one in green, and you tried to soothe Sekhmet with a joy plume in festival season. Counters the one in brown, holding a red-tipped goose feather like it's about to be turned into a weapon. You, of course, are pretending to rearrange a tray of incense cones. But you're absolutely listening. Apparently, feather etiquette isn't just a suggestion, it's the backbone of temple diplomacy. Each movement, each pairing of dust and quill sends a message to the gods. Send the wrong message. You don't just offend a statue, you throw off the balance between pantheons. Or worse, you risk divine mood swings. And today, moods are swinging. The statue of Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war and healing, is currently sealed behind a linen veil because, according to temple gossip, someone brushed her with a feather dipped in lotus oil, a scent of leisure when she was clearly in her scorch the desert phase. This, you're told, is no small mistake. Temple protocol says that when Sekhmet is misfeathered, offerings must be made to both her and to Bastet, her feline counterpart, just to offset the cosmic tension. So now, not only do you have priests scrambling to rebalance dust recipes, but also trying to figure out which cat is currently more offended. You ask someone quietly, can't you just refeather the statue with the correct one? He laughs in that tired, ancient way. You can't unring a temple bell. Feathers, in this context, are ritual speech, and like all speech, once spoken, it echoes. You can apologize, sure, but the offering still lingers. Historians still debate how formalized these conflicts were. Some think the arguments were part of a larger performance meant to train junior priests. Others insist they were deadly serious, and that priests who committed feather code violations could be reassigned, punished, or, according to one dubious scroll, exiled to count goose droppings in the swamps of Mendes. You believe it? You've seen what happens when two priests disagree on whether a statue should be greeted with an upward stroke invocation or downward submission. The gestures are small, almost invisible to an outsider, but to them, it's like calling someone your majesty instead of you again. Later in the morning, you're assigned to redust the statue of Nephthys, goddess of morning and twilight, after someone apparently confused her dust with that of her sister, Isis. The difference: one contains clove pollen, the other doesn't. Easy mistake, but now the statue's energy, as the priests describe it, is agitated, which seems like code for someone's getting yelled at later. You're handed a neutral feather, a pure white heron plume, untouched by oil or pigment. It's considered safe, like sending an emotional ceasefire. Your instructions: 1. Pass across the brow to calm thought. 1. Figure 8. Motion over the heart. 1. Slow arc along the base to clear lingering signals. You carry it out like it's brain surgery. The chamber is silent. You swear you feel the statue ease, like a room slowly cooling after a storm. You place the feather back in its case and bow. No drama, no movement, just the faintest whiff of spikenard oil in the air. Later, in the preparation room, you find something strange. A tiny reed scroll rolled up inside a feather case. It's not part of the usual catalog. The ink is old, the handwriting messy. It reads, "Use the apology plume only after sunset, never during flood season." She remembers. She, no name, no statue noted. You show it to one of the priests. He frowns. "That's not ours. Must be from the old order." The old order refers to a prior generation of priests, possibly even a different temple, who may have kept their own feather codes, passed down privately. Some believe these secret systems still linger in the libraries, in unlabeled drawers, or tucked between pages of mundane ledgers. And that's when you realize even the feather system has layers, not just public codes and sacred oils, but personal rituals, born from generations of practice, adjustment, even stubbornness. Feather rivalries aren't just about protocol. They're about legacy. You wonder how many times the statue has received two conflicting feather messages in the same morning. How many times the gods have watched their caretakers squabble at their feet over scent combinations and wrist angles. You imagine a statue thinking, "Honestly, I liked the clove pollen. Fight me." And maybe that's the point. The gods aren't static. Neither are the humans. The dust might be coded, but the devotion, that part's always been messy. You're not supposed to laugh in a temple, but when you discover the ledger of dusts, it's impossible not to. It's a narrow scroll, stored in a cracked wooden tube tucked behind a crate of resin bricks, clearly forgotten. Or hidden. Probably both. The scribe who wrote it had no flair for hierarchy or reverence. Every line reads like a priest's private journal. If that priest was a bit of a prankster, at first glance, it looks official. Columns of dust names, feather types, directional strokes, and associated outcomes. But then you start reading. 3 clockwise passes with morning feather across left nostril equals divine amusement, mild. Sudden flick to the ear with ibis feather, irritation, or possibly flirtation. Accidental sneeze into blue lotus dust, open portal to awkwardness. Okay, that last one might be a joke. You glance around the feather chamber to make sure no one's watching and read on. There's an entire subsection titled Emergency Feather Substitutions, which includes such gems as, if goose feather unavailable, try palm frond. Pretend it's ceremonial. If dust spills, distract the others with interpretive humming. If statue weeps, no one saw it. You realize with slow amusement, this is a feather survival guide, not for the gods, for the priests. And suddenly, your image of ancient temple life becomes more human. Beneath the rituals, the incense, The layered silence there was stress, last-minute substitutions, passive-aggressive annotations, and yes, feather panic. But what strikes you most is how carefully this scribal satire is written. The humor's light, but the structure is real. Every joke maps onto actual temple codes. Someone with deep knowledge put this together, possibly to teach, possibly to vent. You bring it to Hennity, your not-quite-friendly priest mentor. He reads a few lines, raises an eyebrow, and chuckles, actually. Chuckles. Ha! The left nostril, joy tap. Haven't heard that since my training. Is it real? You ask. He shrugs. As real as anything in here. That answer loops in your brain for hours. The line between sacred and silly isn't always sharp. Sometimes it's feathered. Later that day, you assist in a minor offering ceremony in the side chamber of Mayat, goddess of truth and cosmic balance. Her statue is sleek and minimal, carved from pale alabaster with inlaid jet eyes and the famous ostrich feather headdress. Your assigned task: perform the gesture of alignment. You recognize it instantly from the scroll. One slow pass of the balance feather under both arms. One touch to the lips. And then, weirdly, a soft flick to the elbow. The elbow. You hesitate, but Hennity nods from across the chamber like, yes, do the elbow. You do. And the priest beside you raises his chin in approval. Turns out, even the oddest-seeming gestures had roots. The elbow flick, you learn, was believed to encourage articulation, giving the statue movement memory, so the spirit could stretch in the afterlife. Historians still argue whether these ultra-specific touches meant anything to the divine, or if they were part of an ever-growing choreography passed down by generations who needed structure more than certainty. The Ledger of Dusts seems to understand that tension. You find one line at the bottom of the scroll that sums it all up. If the god answers, change the subject. You snort, quietly, but you also wonder how many priests experienced something that felt like a reply. A feather moving too soon, a breath that wasn't yours, a statue's expression shifting ever so slightly after a particularly poetic stroke. You tuck the scroll away again, not to hide it, but to protect it. It doesn't belong in a display. It belongs in the whisper space between faith and exhaustion, in that half-lit corner of ritual life where humans tired, underfed, perfectionist humans try to do the right thing every morning with feathers and dust. You carry that thought with you as you finish the day's dusting, and when a new trainee fumbles a sacred feather and nearly steps on it, you lean in and whisper, just interpretive humming. You'll be fine. She blinks. What? You smile. Trust me. It's in the manual. You weren't supposed to be here at night. But you are. It's just past moonrise, and the temple corridors have changed. They echo differently, smell different. The baked sandstone of the day has cooled into something dry and metallic. You inhale and catch the scent of crushed indigo, burnt fig wood, and distant river water, and something else sweet, musky, maybe even forbidden. Tonight is private dusting, the kind performed after hours, when the public rituals are done and the gods are officially at rest, except they're not. Because behind sealed doors and hidden panels, certain statues receive their second treatment, not because they need it, but because someone wants them to. A priest named Harkham leads you. He's older, soft-footed, and doesn't speak unless necessary. His lantern is shaded with dyed papyrus to mute the glow. You trail behind him, feather bundle tight in your sash. These are night feathers, darker, oilier, and treated with resins that bloom only after sunset. You've never used them before. The corridor bends and descends into a long, narrow tunnel lined with carved stars. It leads to what Harkham calls the Chamber of Echoes, a sanctuary so removed from the main temple that even most senior priests only hear rumors about it. No one speaks in the chamber, not even in whispers. You pass the threshold. The chamber's ceiling vanishes into shadow. The only light is from small bowls filled with night resin, smoky, amber, glowing like melted copper. And in the center stands a statue unlike any you've seen. No name, no headdress, no obvious gender or animal symbol. It's completely black, made of basalt polished to an obsidian sheen. It reflects nothing. No eyes, just suggestion. A form that hovers between presence and absence, not for worship. Harkham finally says, breaking his own rule, for maintenance. Maintenance. You aren't given a full explanation, but you know enough to guess some statues are old enough, strange enough, powerful enough that they must be honored quietly outside public view. Statues too loaded with history, or secrecy, or misaligned purpose. Your job, feather. The back of the statue's shoulders with the midnight resin feather. It's owl, not goose, coated in a thick mix of night-blooming resin, powdered hematite, and dew collected from tomb roofs. The scent is sharp, almost herbal. You raise the feather, begin the stroke, and instantly feel the change. The air presses in. You can hear the feather's movement, though it makes no sound. It's like brushing time backwards, like uncovering something that was layered over with years of silence. 3 strokes, then pause, then 2 diagonal crosses over the base of the spine. The gesture is called remembrance unspoken. You feel your fingers tremble. Harkham watches but doesn't intervene. He knows better than to interrupt a private exchange. The final part of this ritual is strange. You must walk a slow spiral path around the statue clockwise while brushing your own palm with the tip of the feather. It's symbolic. Of course, a gesture of mutual reflection, as if saying, "You see me, I see you." Neither speaks. Both remember. You wonder what this statue remembers. Historians still argue whether these secret statues were ever meant to be known at all. Some believe they were coded allegories, representations of forgotten deities merged into single, silent forms. Others think they were literal storage devices imbued with spells too dangerous or obscure for general use. One theory suggests they acted like emotional reservoirs holding the overflow of grief, rage, or joy from larger ceremonies. The gods didn't need it, but humans did. And so the feathered rituals at night weren't about gods at all, but about cleaning up after them. The ritual ends without a bow. You simply stop. The feather is placed into a shallow stone dish and left behind, never reused. Night feathers absorb too much. Harkham says, can't be washed. You exit in silence, but something leaves with you. Later that night, as you try to sleep in your chamber, you notice the scent again, resin and river air, warm and a little electric. You dream, lightly, of a feather brushing the inside of your wrist, then the inside of your memory. You wake up with one thought. Who dusts the dusters? The cat is staring at you, and not in the casual, aloof way cats usually stare. This one looks personally offended. You're in the menagerie hall, a sunny courtyard nestled inside the temple complex. Most visitors think it's decorative, a pleasant garden with pools, flowering shrubs, and a few lazily pacing cats, but the initiated know better. The animals here aren't pets. They're assistants, watchers, sometimes even ritual enforcers. And today, you're learning a very important lesson. Temple animals have opinions. Your task is simple enough. Retrieve a ceremonial feather from a reed alcove behind the ibis enclosure. The feather, a rare sun-bleached quill from a sacred hoopoe, is used only during equinox rites and was mistakenly shelved here after yesterday's offering. You're told, just grab it and bring it to the scent hall. You are not told that the ibis will take this personally, because as you reach into the alcove, the bird, long-legged, long-beaked, dressed in sacred black and white, charges you with righteous fury and steals the feather from your hand mid-grab. Gone. Just like that. Feather theft. You stand there, stunned, watching it strut smugly back into the reeds with your precious ritual object clamped triumphantly in its beak. A priest nearby sighs. Again, he mutters, pulling a little tablet from his sash. He scribbles something down and adds, "That's the third this week." Apparently, this particular ibis has a track record. Some say it's the reincarnation of a jealous junior scribe. Others insist it's just a bird with a taste for drama. Either way, it's now your problem. So begins the feather retrieval ceremony. Unofficial, undocumented, but as real as anything here. You and 2 other novices attempt to recover the feather using a series of non-threatening gestures, bribe offerings, a bowl of soaked figs, and soft vocalizations. It feels ridiculous. It is ridiculous, and yet entirely serious. After 20 minutes, the ibis finally drops the feather in the pool, triumphantly, like it's making a point. You retrieve it with a curved reed hook. It's wet, slightly chewed, and ritually speaking, compromised. You're told to bring it to the feather reconciliation table. Yes, that's real. A low stone bench where damaged or dishonored feathers undergo cleansing rites. Your soggy feather is gently rinsed with rosemary-infused water, dried over heated sand, and re-anointed with cedar oil while two priests hum the purification cadence. Meanwhile, the ibis watches from the shadows, judging. Temple animals, you're learning, are more than symbols. They're participants. Each one has its own station, lineage, and sometimes a personality disorder. Cats, especially that cat from earlier. She's not just any temple cat. Her name is Mirafet, and she's the fourth in a bloodline of feline attendants assigned to Bastet's shrine. She reportedly knows who in the temple has been lying. No, really. A scroll tucked behind a statue notes, if Mirafet leaves the chamber before the final incense is lit, recheck your truth. Today, she follows you all the way to the incense quarters, tail flicking like a metronome of disapproval. When you light the wrong blend, just a pinch too much, Cassia. She turns and exits without a sound. You panic slightly. Later, a priest reassures you. It's not personal. She's just discerning. Still, you relight the offering, and she returns, sits, blinks. Approval restored? Historians still argue whether temple animals were formally trained or merely sacred by association. There's evidence that cats and ibises were selectively bred within temple complexes, and even buried with honors. Some were mummified. Some had shrines of their own. Fringe theories go further, suggesting that animal behavior was used as a divine communication system. If the ibis screeches twice at sunrise, delay the feathering. If the temple dog curls up beside the statue's feet, use the reconciliation feather. If three cats gather under a sycamore at once, cancel everything and go home. You're starting to believe it. Because the more time you spend around the animals, the more you sense they're not just watching. They're recording, in their own way, holding you to a standard that's half ritual, half instinct. You finish your duties with Mirafet perched nearby. When you bow to the statue of Bastet, you feel her presence extend beyond the stone, into the breath, into the whiskers, into the soft weight of the cat pressing briefly against your ankle before disappearing into shadow. You'll never admit it, but you bow again just in case she saw the first one and wasn't impressed. Statues don't have emotions, except when they do. Today starts calmly enough, sun just peeking over the temple walls. Pigeons already arguing in the rafters. You're assigned to assist with a ceremonial feathering during a state visit from a provincial governor. Nothing too fancy, just a quick ritual in the Shrine of Ra to confirm divine favor over the visitor's upcoming construction project. Feathered reassurance. Basically, you're handed the tools, a stiff white ostrich feather, symbolic of cosmic order, and a tray of gold-flecked dust meant to illuminate intentions. That's the official phrasing. You're told to apply the feather with wide, deliberate sweeps, keeping gestures symmetrical, easy, until it isn't. Because right in the middle of the ritual, with the governor and his advisors watching, the lead priest drops the feather, not in a soft, quiet way. No, he fumbles it mid-stroke and sends it spinning end over end onto the stone floor, where it lands tip down like a javelin of doom. Everyone freezes. You feel the air tighten like a held breath. Feathers, especially those designated for official rituals, cannot touch the floor. Not because of germs, because of status. The ground is a realm of decay, of the mortal, of the untamed. A feather that touches it becomes polluted, confused, or, according to one priest's whisper, arrogant. The statue of Re, massive and golden, doesn't move. Of course not. But the room suddenly feels warmer, like a warning, like you're all being watched by something older than consequence. The lead priest hesitates, then, to your horror, picks the feather up and tries to continue. The next stroke lands just off-center. Too quick, too apologetic. The balance is lost. You glance sideways and see the governor's face fall just slightly. And then this is real. The statue's flame flickers against the breeze. A downward gust from the roof vent should have pushed the incense smoke left. Instead, it coils sharply right and vanishes. No one speaks. Later, the temple will issue a formal apology. The feather is declared ritually unstable and burned in a salt fire. A replacement is chosen after 3 divination rolls, and a cup of beer is offered to Ra to restore conversational clarity. You don't think beer is going to fix this? That night, you overhear 2 priests arguing behind the incense hall. If he'd just paused and started over, but the governor was watching, so what? You never rush a restroke. You hear that phrase again and again, never rush a restroke. It becomes a kind of mantra among the temple staff, a warning, a wisdom, a joke. The fallout is quiet but dramatic. The lead priest is reassigned to a lesser shrine, Anubis, down by the embalming halls. It's not punishment. Exactly, just a cooling off. The governor delays his project and sends a letter that includes the ominous phrase, "I respect the silence of the gods." Yikes! Historians still debate whether moments like these were interpreted as divine judgment or simply ritual accidents, but the records are clear. One dropped feather, especially during a public rite, could derail political momentum. A few even blame regional rebellions on botched offerings. You ask Henneti if this is overreaction. He just smiles, slow and tired. The gods don't yell, they shift. From then on, the rules tighten. Feather transport is done with 2 hands only. All motions must be rehearsed 3 times before the actual application. And a new protocol is introduced. Feather trial swings. That means every feather is now pre-tested in an empty chamber, under supervision, before it ever touches a statue. The gesture is performed, not on the divine image, but in front of a mirror polished with sacred vinegar and lapis paste. The theory is, if the stroke offends the reflection, it will offend the god. You try it yourself. The mirror shows your motion 3 times, each one identical, but the priest watching says, "That last one looked too desperate. You don't know how to fix that." But you try again, and this time, when the feather swings, the dust hangs just a second longer in the air like it's interested. That gesture gets approved. You realize something. This isn't about perfection. It's about honesty. The gods don't need you to be flawless. They need you to mean it. Later, when you finally get to feather Ra's statue again, this time in a private rite, you hold the new feather like a vow. Steady hands, 3 strokes. Breathe in. Dust shimmers. The flame flickers the right direction, and you feel it. Not forgiveness, not pride, just a quiet, radiant. Yes, you never thought you'd attend a feather bath, but here you are. It's just before sunrise in a circular side courtyard called the Chamber of Cleansing Breaths. There's no statue, no incense, no chanting. Just a large, shallow basin filled with rose water, surrounded by tall reeds, and a low table draped in fresh linen. On that table, a pile of feathers, used ones, stained ones, bent, tired, burdened by too many emotions, too many strokes, too many awkward half-prayers. These feathers have seen things. They've been pressed to weeping gods, twitching statues, forgotten altars. Some carry scents no one can quite name anymore. And every 7th day, they bathe. Yes, the feathers. You kneel beside the basin, sleeves rolled to the elbow, holding a soft-tip scrubbing reed. Your instructions are gentle and weirdly specific. Swirl clockwise for feathers used in mourning rituals. Counterclockwise for those used in joy. Don't mix feathers from different gods unless you want to confuse the water. That's an actual quote. Henneti stands nearby, supervising with a dry cloth in hand and a face like stone. "Respect the tool," he murmurs. "Respect its memory." The feathers are dipped, soaked, lifted, brushed. It's oddly intimate and kind of emotional. You clean a vulture feather still tinged with blue myrrh, a goose plume darkened from repeated sun oil applications, a tiny swan down, barely longer than your thumb, marked with a crimson thumbprint. You don't ask. Some feathers float stubbornly at odd angles. Others sink as if they're ready to be done. You're told these are retired. They go into the ash basket not to be destroyed in anger, but released with honor. Burning a feather is a big deal before it's done. It's wrapped in linen, dabbed with fig sap, and whispered over. The whispering part isn't mandatory, but most priests do it. You hear phrases like, "Thank you for carrying sorrow," or "May your softness return to wind." Henneti even murmurs to one, "You served during flood season. That's more than most." Feathers, it seems, have rhythms. You'd always thought of them as tools, extensions of ritual. But here, kneeling in warm rose water, watching a feather turn slowly in your palm, you feel something more. A kind of reverence not for the act, but for the act's memory. Historians rarely mention this part. There are almost no surviving records of feather maintenance. A few cryptic mentions exist in side margins. Feather must not stiffen in grief or wash sorrow before reuse, but the rest, oral, passed down from quiet priest to sleep-deprived apprentice. One scroll, rarely cited, refers to the fifth chamber of Mayat, which some believe was entirely dedicated to feather preservation. Others think it was a metaphor, another poetic flourish about balance, but you're starting to see it differently. Feathers carry vibration, oil, dust, scent, meaning. They're not just instruments, they're archives. You wonder how many modern feathers still carry the weight of long-forgotten rituals. How many have stroked the same statue's cheek for 50 years and begun to understand something? Later that morning, you dry the feathers, not with cloth, with wind. A junior priest fans them using a thin strip of linen, timed to a silent beat you can't hear. This is called giving breath. It's how you remind the feather. It's not just an object, it's a messenger. Once dry, each feather is examined. Bent tips, clipped, frayed ends, smoothed with myrrh sap. Some are deemed too heavy, which isn't about weight at all. It means they've soaked up too much of whatever they were touching: grief, anger, desperation. These are set aside for reconsecration, a long, poetic way of saying they need therapy before they're safe again. You're asked to place one feather, a long ibis quill-stained pale violet, onto the plate of reversal. That's a flat black disc carved from obsidian, used only once per moon cycle. You gently lay it down and watch the reflection shift. The feather looks darker in the mirror. A priest hums, low and soft, "That one carried a lie," he says. You blink. A lie. He nods. Someone asked for healing but didn't want it. You don't know what that means, but you believe him. The day ends not with a ceremony, but with a breath. All the cleaned feathers are returned to their cases, re-oiled, re-bundled, relabeled. The chamber is quiet now, but in your mind, every feather feels like a voice, a whisper, a hand on the shoulder saying, "I remember what you tried to say," even when you didn't say it right. And as you leave, Henneti adds softly, "When you sleep tonight, listen for wings." You're not sure if he means literal wings, or dreams, or maybe just the breeze brushing through your own thoughts. Either way, you hear it. Soft, slow, like a feather being forgiven. The temple is quiet today. Too quiet. You're summoned before sunrise to the inner chapel of Sekhmet's memory, which is never a good sign. The chamber is only used for special rites, funerals, oaths, or the fulfillment of unusual requests. You've never even seen it unlocked. Henneti is already there, pacing. His usual air of patient sarcasm has vanished, replaced by something heavier. He nods once. "Today, you'll feather a pharaoh." "Which one?" you ask. "The one?" The request arrived days ago, sealed in wax, wrapped in blue linen, and delivered by a scribe who didn't speak, only bowed. A royal descendant has invoked the last request clause of temple protocol, a rarely used, half-mythical addendum written generations ago by Pharaoh Jedrit during his final illness. The clause requires this, that his statue be feathered once at dawn every day for eternity. No skipping, no substitutions, no automation. One priest, one feather, one moment of deliberate, human devotion. You'll be the first to carry it out. The chamber is unlike any other. Cool, oval, carved entirely from rose granite and veined with green malachite. The statue rests on a single column pedestal, surrounded by 7 braziers that burn without smoke. It doesn't look angry or grand, it looks tired. Not weary, not defeated, just the kind of tired that comes after carrying too much memory. You're given one feather, just one. It's not from a goose, or ibis, or hawk. This is a rare vulture down feather, braided at the base with silver thread and tipped in something dark that glimmers faintly purple in the light. Royal mourning plumage, Henneti says, used once, never repeated. It smells like ink and rain, and the moment before a confession. You're told not to anoint it, no oils. The high priest insists this feather carries its own scent. The statue of Jedrit is taller than life, carved from a single block of lapis-streaked basalt, eyes downcast, hands resting on his knees, the mouth slightly open, as if waiting not to speak, but to be heard. You begin the ritual in silence. One stroke across the crown invocation, one across the brow remembrance, one down the left arm continuity, one across the chest affirmation, and then the final stroke, a diagonal arc across the statue's heart, meant to echo the first heartbeat after death. The feather leaves no trace, yet somehow the air feels heavier where it passed. You step back, bow once, and wait. Nothing moves, but something shifts. You don't see it. You feel it. Like when a song ends and the silence it leaves behind carries the echo of its last note. The high priest closes the record tablet and seals it with a wax stamp. It's done, he says. Return tomorrow. Same time. You will do this again and again and again until you're no longer able. You ask, later, why the clause exists. Why a pharaoh would want this ritual carried out until time forgets him. Haneti says he didn't want to be remembered as a man. He wanted to be remembered as a gesture. Historians still debate whether Jedrit's clause was sincere devotion or royal paranoia. Some say he feared being erased by his enemies. Others believe he truly wanted to gift the priesthood a perpetual act of meaning, a ritual that could outlast power, language, and even belief. There's a theory that the clause was never meant for the pharaoh at all, that it was a message to the future, a reminder that even the mightiest must rely, eventually, on one small feather in one small hand. You lie awake that night, replaying the strokes in your mind. You remember how the feather felt dense, balanced, more like an extension of your own breath than an object. You remember the air's reaction, the way it thickened just slightly with each pass. You don't feel burdened. You feel chosen. The next morning, you return to the chamber alone. The feather is waiting in its case, untouched. And though the statue hasn't moved, something in its posture feels different, lighter, like maybe, just maybe, it recognizes you now, and will, always. You're back where you started. Only now, everything feels different. The sun is barely up, and you're walking through the archive wing. A vaulted stone hallway few priests visit regularly. Dust hangs here not as a nuisance, but like memory. Ancient, patient, almost proud of itself. A visiting scribe from Thebes requested a private tour of the temple's lesser-known relics. You've been assigned to guide him. He's quiet, observant, the kind of man who hums thoughtfully at cracked storage jars and frayed scrolls. You don't expect much excitement from this errand until he stops short in front of a plain, unmarked wooden box. This one, he says, may I open it? You nod. Inside, feathers, old ones, fragile, discolored from time and heat, but unmistakably ritual. Your heart skips. These aren't just used feathers, they're forgotten ones. Some are wrapped in linen, others loose. Each is tagged in a script barely legible, so old it predates your earliest training scrolls. You gently lift one. It's slim, dark, and brittle, with faint streaks of crimson powder clinging to its edge. You recognize the composition immediately: crushed pomegranate skin and burnt resin, a combination used only in grief rituals tied to solar eclipses. The scribe leans in. Do you know what these are? You don't. Not fully. He nods toward the tags. They're prayers, silent ones. He explains, during certain rare ceremonies, ones too politically dangerous or emotionally unstable to voice out loud, priests would craft specific feather rituals using coded dusts and directional strokes. The prayers were never spoken. The statue was dusted, the moment absorbed, and the feather sealed away forever. Why keep them? You ask. He answers softly. Because even unspoken prayers need somewhere to rest. You realize then these feathers are archives of emotion, not history, not fact, but pure, undiluted feeling, sealed in plumage and ritual. There's one feather in particular that pulls your attention. It's smaller than the others. Owl. Perhaps bound in faded blue linen. The tag simply reads, "Used during the night of forgetting." You ask what that means. The scribe shrugs. No one knows, but the handwriting matches a priest from 3 dynasties ago. He disappeared shortly after this was archived. You replace the feather. Reverently, the box is resealed. The moment passes, but something lingers. That night, after the tour is done, you return to the feather chamber alone. Not to dust, not to clean, just to be there. You light a single oil lamp, sit cross-legged on the floor, breathe, and slowly begin to recall every feather you've used, each stroke, each sound, each moment where a statue didn't move but something in you did. You remember the ibis who judged you, the smile you felt from Hathor, the weight of the pharaoh's final gesture, the mirror that caught your doubt, and then one more memory surfaces. The first time a feather trembled before touching a statue. You didn't imagine that. You know you didn't. Historians still argue about the purpose of it all. They debate whether the gods truly entered the statues, whether the rituals were sincere or performative, whether any of it really mattered beyond social cohesion. But here, in this moment, you understand something deeper. The ritual didn't need to change the gods. It changed you. You sit in silence. Let the candle burn low, and as it flickers out, you feel a breeze pass through the chamber. No windows, no vents, just a whisper of air, like the soft sigh of a feather, remembering you. And now, as the temple fades from view and the statues grow still again, let your mind drift gently through the shadowed halls you've wandered. Each feather, each motion, each grain of dust you brushed away is still suspended in air somewhere, like a prayer never spoken aloud. The gods are quiet now. The rooms are empty. Even the ibises are asleep. You're left only with the rhythm of breath and the weightless memory of motion, those slow arcs, those delicate strokes, those ancient gestures that no longer need to be performed because they live now in you. Feel the cool stone beneath your feet, the hush of old incense in your lungs, the faint warmth of a remembered hand guiding yours. There is no need to move anymore. No need to speak. All the words have already been feathered into silence. Let them settle. Let you settle. You've done well, feather bearer. Now sleep. You won't be forgotten.